The Addiction Podcast, Point of No Return.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Addiction Podcast. My name is Joni Siegel, and I'm the host for this podcast. My husband, Steve Siegel, is the producer of the podcast. If you have a story you would like to share with us, please reach out. Our email is theaddictionpodcast@yahoo.com. Just a reminder to please subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen to podcasts and give us a good review. Also, give us a good review on YouTube. Give us a thumbs up on our videos. The reason we ask you to do that is not just because we think we're so great, but we are trying to offer a message of hope and help for people suffering from addiction. And lots of times they kind of feel alone. So we feel like if they can find our podcast, they'll get some of those messages of hope. So if you could do that, that would be great. Today's episode is episode number 306, and it's an interview with a gentleman named Jason Yamas. Jason has a story like none we've ever shared before. He is a fiction and nonfiction writer making his prose debut as author of Tweakerworld, a memoir. Now, I didn't realize, but tweaker means a person addicted to methamphetamine. That's a slang definition. After Jason's world fell apart in Los Angeles, he moved to Berkeley for a fresh start with his kid brother. Just one problem. His long-closeted Adderall addiction had exploded into an out-of-control crystal meth binge. Within weeks, Jason plunged into the sprawling party-and-play subculture of the Bay Area's gay community. It is a wildly decadent scene of drugs, group sex, and criminals, and yet it is also filled with surprising characters, people who continually subverted Jason's own presumptions of the stereotypical tweaker. Soon, Jason became a dealer on the pretense of researching this Tweakerworld for a project that would carry him, like a life raft, back to the shores of normal life. With painful honesty, Jason has crafted a landmark narrative that is not just a personal account of addiction, but a portrait of a vulnerable, largely undocumented community of people who, for many reasons, have been marginalized to the point of invisibility. Let's talk to Jason Yamas. Jason Yamas, thank you so much for being willing to talk to us today. Your story is, I think, unique from any other story that we've had. So I'm very excited to talk to you.
I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. Tell us, where did you grow up? Just a little bit about your background. Like, you mentioned in your bio Adderall. How did that come about? Like, what was your life like when you were a kid?
When I grew up outside of Philadelphia in a town called Chaddsford, Pennsylvania. My family was in the restaurant and hotel business, and I was one of those kids who worked after school and on the weekends, cleaning hotel rooms. I was very involved with my family's business. I had a very boring middle class upbringing. A white boy from the suburbs, and for the most part, it was very innocent. I never dabbled with drugs or even alcohol, really, besides marijuana, in high school. So that was not even in my purview. Even going to college, I studied acting at NYU. And while I would hear of other people who were studying more laborious type studies, participating in Adderall and those types of study drugs back in the college years when they become popular, it was never really on my radar because I didn't need it to stay up. I wasn't writing papers, I was rehearsing scenes, and so it really didn't hit me until my 20s when I was producing media and films and finding myself able to do way more things if I was able to be on some sort of stimulant. I was dabbling with different kinds of stimulants, but Adderall certainly was the one that gave me the most gusto and the most wherewithal, or at least at the beginning it does, to give you the impression that you're limitless, that it holds no bounds to what you can accomplish. And it made me more productive. It made me more confident. So,
was it prescribed, Jason, or you just bought it off the street or from friends, or?
So not at first. At first, it was just I would be on set. There would be somebody there that had a 10 milligram Adderall, and they knew we were doing a late night shoot, and they would offer it to me. And then, of course, once I knew that that was an option, I'd go back to them and, could I get two of them? And then once the addiction really took hold, and I started pursuing any avenue I could to get it. I went to the doctor, which sadly, I don't think is uncommon, and created a story, Googled how do I get Adderall from a doctor, and knew all the buzzwords to say and how to ask for it and how to lie, for it. So I did end up getting a prescription that would supplement the person I was getting it from. And then you get creative. You find other dealers as you go on.
Yeah. Now, you didn't stick with Adderall, though, right? You transitioned at some point. How did that come about?
I did. I transitioned into crystal meth. Luckily, my meth addiction did not last years like it can and does for many. I was lucky in that respect. But how did it transition? Well, I ran out of Adderall, and I had hit a point where I was taking up to 120 milligrams a day, of Adderall, which, they only prescribe, I believe at most, don't quote me on this, but I think, 40 or 50 at most. Usually it's 10 to 30 milligrams. So I was taking at minimum 4 times the amount I should have. And I wasn't sleeping. I was not able to be an attentive partner to my boyfriend at the time. And because of that, I had told myself, maybe I probably was lying to myself, but I had told myself I was going to quit the Adderall. We had a tragedy in my partner's family, and I intended to quit it. But I had to get through a few intensive work days with a very intense boss that I had, and I had no more Adderall to get through those days before I was going to have a week off when I could quit cold turkey and expect the come down that was on its way, and it was inevitable. So I had read an article that was floating around social media, and it was written by a pediatrician, the article, and it was arguing how crystal meth and Adderall were essentially chemically the same drug.
Right.
A few molecular differences. I'm not a chemist.
And the article was sort of to dissuade people from putting children on Adderall, but it meant something different to you.
Well, that's how an addict thinks. An addict will contort facts and perception to meet their needs.
Understood.
And that's exactly what I did. That's exactly what an addict will do. So yes, I went out and bought crystal meth, and as I say in this book I've written about it, finding meth as a straight person might be difficult. As a gay person, especially a gay person on the West Coast of America, it is a click away. You can go onto a dating app, or more realistically, a hookup app, and find crystal meth in a heartbeat. So it wasn't difficult.
I'm sorry. So in the gay community, it was way easier to access crystal meth, as far as you know, from like straight people? There's something wrong with that, Jason. There's something okay. I'll be quiet now.
They're always okay.
It sounds as though, okay, I'm going to digress just for a second. Please. We know that pharmaceutical companies targeted lower income blue collar workers in places like West Virginia with OxyContin. We know that Purdue and other pharmaceutical companies did that. So I'm wondering, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but this makes me wonder if there's any sort of targeting going on there.
Probably.
Your thought? Yeah.
Yes, probably. I would, and I mean, I could roll with the conspiracy theories into how crack became an epidemic in the 80s as well, and how that was targeted with the help of the CIA. But you can watch the show Snowfall on FX for that story. But
Okay.
yes, I do believe that there is probably some targeting going on.
Fentanyl is the single deadliest drug threat our nation has ever encountered, and fentanyl is everywhere. From large metropolitan areas to rural America, no community is safe from this poison. Steered Straight, a nonprofit drug education group based in Tennessee, is on a mission to educate students, teachers, parents, and communities on the dangers of fentanyl through their free Fentanyl, Fake and Fatal online course. This course was created for middle and high school students as well as teachers and parents. You can find it at www.courses.steeredstraight.org. We must take every opportunity to spread the word to prevent fentanyl-related overdose deaths and poisonings from claiming scores of American lives every day. Once again, that's www.courses.steeredstraight.org for a free course on fentanyl. In his 10 years as a top draft pick and starting center for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Randy Grimes had to play through pain or lose his job. This led to an opioid addiction, and eventually he lost nearly everything. But Randy beat the addiction, then founded Pro Athletes in Recovery, and now details his story in his riveting book, Off Center, a memoir of addiction, recovery, and redemption in professional football, with a foreword by iconic player and coach Mike Ditka. We know Randy's story and highly recommend Off Center. It will inspire you to create your own comeback. Available at Amazon and anywhere books are sold.
But what people don't realize is that crystal meth is at most prevalent in the gay community. Everybody's watched Breaking Bad, and we saw how they cook it and how they move it around. But when you saw people doing it, it was just the kind of stereotypical tweaker, the toothless person, the country bumpkin. You picture these backwoods type folk smoking crystal meth and meth face and all of these kind of viral images that we've seen over the years. But what most people don't know, and I think where your shock is coming from, especially straight people don't know, and a lot of gay people don't know, is that it is so popular among gay men in particular, and it is spreading it to other sects of the gay community. Because
I was just going to say, why? Why do you think that is?
Well, I can tell you exactly why it is. So crystal meth, it's not just being done for the sake of getting high. It's being done in conjunction with dangerous sexual habits. Crystal meth completely eradicates inhibitions. It allows people to engage in some of their darker and deeper fantasies, sexual fantasies, and a lot of that, where that becomes attractive to a gay person, is usually somebody that is suffering the crisis of shame. Shame is a very common characteristic in the gay community, being that it's only been in the past decade or so that queer people have really begun to see mainstream rights. First with DOMA, what was that, 2013? Don't Ask, Don't Tell being repealed, and only just now seeing folks like Pete Buttigieg in the cabinet and different queer politicians rise to in the ranks. But before that, and still so many queer people were made to feel other, were tormented in many ways, whether by peers or family that didn't accept them. And that manifests into an immense amount of grief and shame. And that then can manifest into internalized homophobia, where we don't believe that normal, healthy sexual intercourse is something that we can engage in without feeling gross.
Right.
And crystal meth allows us to go there.
I get it. I never, like I said before we started, we haven't had someone like yourself who is a part of the gay community, or if we have, they haven't said that, and
Sure.
who has a perspective from it. And I think it's important for people to hear, because people need to know that, if we've got families who are listening, who have a loved one who is gay and, also addicted, this is really good information, I think, to share. I'm glad you wrote your book as well, and we will talk more about your book. Okay, but so you're in San Francisco now, right? Berkeley, right?
I'm actually in Los Angeles now.
No, I don't mean now. I mean, as part of your story.
Yes, at the beginning of my story, I was living in Berkeley.
Okay, good. I reverted to the present tense.
That's correctly. Okay. The book is written in present tense, so I understand how you would do that.
There you go. Okay, so you must have seen then, as a tweaker, that there was perhaps a market in the community you were involved in?
For sure. Yes. And, it goes deeper into, so crystal meth really will unveil some of our more maudlin and disgraceful characteristics that we may have within us, and it brought out my inner capitalist. I have to admit, I ended up seeing an opportunity to be able to make money from my addiction, and more than. By the way, I did not end up making money in the end, as most.
Of course not, because you usually use it, right?
Dealers,
use it up.
Yeah. Use it or lose it, and I lost. And so, I did. I saw an opportunity to become a dealer within the community, and but it was even less about making money and more about feeling important and feeling powerful, and not wanting to admit that I was just some lowly addict, who was going to end up homeless or dead on the street. I deluded myself into believing that my addiction to crystal meth was virtuous.
You are listening to the Addiction Podcast, Point of No Return. For more information on the podcast, or to reach out if you have a story you would like to share with us, go to our Facebook page by the same name, or you can email us at theaddictionpodcast@yahoo.com, or go to our website, theaddictionpodcast.com, or call us at 727-314-7080. And please remember to subscribe to our podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, and give us a 5-star review. Sometimes the hardest thing about getting someone into recovery is getting them to agree to treatment. Bobby Newman, a certified drug counselor with 30 years experience and an over 85% success rate as an interventionist, has created a series of 12 videos that you can use right now to learn every step to get your loved one to agree to treatment. Call 866-989-4499 today and say the word podcast to get a 10% discount. Or go to newmaninterventions.com and type in the word podcast for a 10% discount. This service comes with a free 1-hour consultation with Bobby.
That it had purpose, that I could not only become a dealer, I could be the best dealer. I could be the first nonviolent dealer. I could change how business is done. I could find homeless people that were on the street addicted to meth and turn them into dealers and give them an opportunity to rise up and be able to once again have their own residence again. I mean, just like, this deluded Mother Teresa complex that I found my way into. I don't think that that's necessarily the typical trajectory for every queer meth addict, but it was mine.
Fascinating. And it obviously worked for you for a while, right?
Yeah. Sure. Worked can, yeah. I admit that it was fun for a very little bit of time, and then of course the inevitable comes. You make enemies. People don't like that you're stealing their livelihood. Who is this? Who's this boy with an NYU degree? Walking into our territory and taking our clients and taking our business away from us. So I had those nemesis. I also at one point found out that there was a DEA informant that had been planted in my organization. That sent me. And then of course you continue to, with as busy as I was and working 22 hours a day, sleeping maybe 4 hours a week, the sleep deprivation plus all of the chemicals, plus all of the added stress, I ended up in a nearly irreversible psychosis. It's
wow.
Almost a miracle that I'm sitting here today and able to recount it, because I didn't know if I was coming back from it, to be honest.
And how is that? How did you come back from it?
That's a good question. They put me on Risperdal at first, just to be able to ground me. And Risperdal is a pharmaceutical that's given to often to people with schizophrenia and other psychosis type disorders.
Were you in a mental hospital at that point?
I was not in a mental hospital at that point. I was in a rehab facility, and the psychiatrist was prescribing me that for a few weeks just to get me back, because all I wanted to do was return to the world. Even when I was at rehab at the very end, I could not give up this world that I believed was now my own. So that was the very first thing, was that pharmaceutical, which thank God for that, because it gave me enough wherewithal to not get on a plane and go back to San Francisco and try to do it all again, but to return back to Pennsylvania, where I'm from, and nearer to my family. But the answer, how did I get out of it? It's an old adage, but people, places, and things. I'm sure you've heard that. People, places, and things. You stay away from the people, the places, and the things that constituted your addiction. Yep. I could not go back to San Francisco. No. Could I now? Maybe I'll go back. I'll visit. But I had to get away from the people, and it's not easy, because when you're so deep in that addiction, and this has got to be something this is something not enough people mention when getting into the recovery piece of their journey, is that you want so desperately to take the people with you, the people that you knew in your addiction, because you have a trauma bond with them that is incomparable to anything else. No one on the other side, as I call it, the sober side, they don't really know. They don't really know what your experience was. Even if you go into the rooms, AA, NA, CMA, Smart Recovery, whatever that is, whatever you choose to do. Even if you go in those rooms, people have their own stories, but that was their world. You want people from your world. So it was very difficult for me. And in fact, I ended up in a relationship, if you could call that, with an individual who had been in meth addiction with me, but he had also been there for 12 years prior to me. And we were together for the first few months of our sobriety. And it just became very apparent. I was able to start making the transition back to normality, going to see comedy, reading books, listening to podcasts, just the normal things that you disconnect from when you're in your addiction. And he just couldn't. He couldn't disconnect from the rage. He could, he was smashing holes in walls still. He was breaking my phone. The drugs weren't there, but the abuse, because of the inner torment that he had not begun to heal, and his went so much deeper. So as much as I wanted to hold on to him as a vehicle to hold on to that world so I could feel understood in recovery, I had to let it go. So you really do. You have to detach from the people, places, and things, and it's really about time. You have to. So many people, when I, since the publication of my book was announced, I've had so many people reach out to me about their gay queer friend who's in meth addiction, and some of them I've been able to guide into rehab. And when I talk to them, they're like, "Oh, no, I'm doing outpatient. I don't want to go to inpatient rehab." And I'm like, "Go to inpatient rehab. Don't even do the 30-day, do the 60-day. Do they have a 90-day? Do the 90-day." And they think that that's insane. They got to get back to the normal life. But no, get away from it
get away from that quote unquote normal life. Jason, how long have you been clean and sober?
About 6.5 years. It'll be 7 in March.
Well done. Very well
Thank
done
you.
on that.
Thank
I know
you.
that it's not
so much
easy.
Nicer.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah.
It's not easy, but it is so worth it. The highs are they last longer. Actually.
Way higher, way better. Yeah. And you have tools to handle the lows when they come.
Absolutely.
You touched on something. There was something that you touched on that I lost it, but that's okay. People listening to the podcast, make sure you listen to every single word that Jason said, because he touched on so many points.
Sorry, I talk so fast.
It's okay. It's okay. So tell us about the book. When did you start writing it? And tell us about it. What led you to do that?
Well, I had to do it. So I was a documentary filmmaker, producer. I had studied acting. I've always wanted to be a filmmaker. So even when I was in my addiction, and when I was in San Francisco, from when I was just a user to when I was running the whole crystal meth market for the gay community, that entire time I was telling myself that I was researching a film I was going to write about this world, which is very much just a bullshit justification that an addict, I was clinching onto the identity that I knew for myself as an artist, and seeing, okay, well, how can I contort that identity to match this new foray into this world? And that's the bullshit I invented. Now, the fact that I'm actually following through with it is a different beast. It's not really what I was researching. It has more perspective. The book or movie that I thought I was making by living it in San Francisco was a full-on glorification of the world. I hope that the book is read. I don't write it as a cautionary tale, but I hope that it's received as one. When did I start writing it? I got clean in 2017, and then I spent about a year being tormented in my nightmares every night, reliving different scenes, different characters, different images from the psychosis, auditory hallucinations.
Wow.
It would come back to me in dreams, and it was too much to handle.
Yeah.
And it was so expansive that I had no idea how to get it out of me. And I'm not a trained writer. I have written screenplays. I've written plays. I know dialogue and action. I didn't at that time know prose.
Right.
So I sat with a friend who is a writer and said, "Hey, if I just write everything that happened to me, do you think you could make it into a book?" And she said, "Yeah, get started. Write it all down." But by the time I did it, and I just outlined everything, and that was probably 30 pages of events. I wrote down everybody's name that I could remember. There was 115 different characters. And then he wasn't available after all to write the book. So I said, well, I'm just going to try. We'll see what even comes out. And I made myself sit down every single day for 8 to 10 hours in my burgundy chair in Philadelphia and just, as much as I could get out, even if it didn't make sense. And it's very much not what is in this book now.
Show the cover again. It's Tweakerworld, everybody.
It's called Tweakerworld.
I mean, I'll put a picture up too, but there you go. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, that's good discipline. 8 hours every day writing. That's pretty good.
It's honestly what it took. It really does. It really does take discipline. When people say, I want to write a book, I just literally just sit down and just start writing. You don't have to. It doesn't need to be good. It doesn't need to be good at first, and it won't. But if you don't have training like me, it will not be good. It will be incoherent. The people I sent it to at first were like, "Oh, I don't know if this is a book." It might find its way to being a screenplay, and really. Then the process, my first draft was 300,000 words, which I don't even think there's a Winston Churchill biography that's that long. Just ridiculous. I mean, talk about the narcissism of it all. But we whittled it down. The book now is 90,000 words, which is a normal book size. And so what I say to people that want to write a book about their story is just write it the fuck down. Write it down. Yep. And then you go back in and you texture it and you dig deeper. You say, okay, well, this feels like the truth, but what's the deeper truth? What's the polygraph truth of this moment? Yep. And what did this room smell like? What did this, and you just dig deeper into your memory and fill it in. Yeah. And then of course, then cut away. That's a whole process, and it took many years. It took many years to get it to where it is now.
Are you looking to write a screenplay? Because it sure sounds like it'd be a really good screenplay, Jason.
There's so much story here that I don't think we could do it in a film. And I will say that I am working with a wonderful TV producer at the very early stages right now of development. I'm not sure when this podcast will come out, but maybe we'll have more news about it.
January 12th.
January 12th.
Okay. Yeah.
Probably won't have more news about it then. Okay.
But share your news with us, would you? Please keep us posted because, I will mention it. I will talk about it. I want, I think that, you writing the book, and by the way, you can get it on Amazon. It's called Tweakerworld by Jason Yamas, just like it sounds, Yamas. I know what it was that you said that you were talking about the partner that you could not stay with. And that is that he didn't get to the underlying cause. And we've said so many times, and I think you will relate to this so many times, that the drugs are the solution. They're not the problem. And there's some underlying something there that for which drugs become a solution. And it sounded like what you were talking about. He never got to whatever the problem was underlying.
Yeah, and I would like to talk more about him because he's a wonderful example of the painful struggle that recovery really can be for most people. Yeah. My story is unique in there, and I'm so grateful that I have such an incredible assemblage of friends and family members that have been there for me and such an incredible support system. He did not. He does not. He is currently in rehab again. This is, I think, his 9th time in rehab since we both got clean around the same time. And I've done everything I can to try to support him in getting there. But, when I see him and he gets clean again, he gets a boyfriend immediately, and he goes to Facebook and seeks validation, and it's false. It's the constant validation that you can utilize social media for, and we all do it. Non-addicts do it non-drug addicts, I should say, do it in other microdosing kind of ways. But us addicts will seek that validation as a remedy, and it is 100% not addressing the underlying cause. Right. It's just a feel good. It's just another high. It's another hit, whether it's meth or a like on Facebook. It produces the same endorphins.
Interesting. Jason, you're a rock star. You have to keep me posted about the television series, because your whole story is like the Breaking Bad of the gay community in Berkeley. kind of, sort of,
Yeah.
And then you have whatever the drug cartels are in that community wanting to then, basically put you out of business. So it's you got some drama there. I want you to definitely keep us posted about that.
No doubt. And with the TV series, we're not just going to tell my story. We're aiming to tell many other types of meth addict stories as well. And how did they all end up here, and what's their journey? So really widening the lens with the next adaptation. So
I like it, and I think it's very needed. Thank you so much for talking to us today, Jason.
Thank you so much for having me. It was really a pleasure. And, there are resources out there for if you do have a friend or family member in meth addiction. The resources are growing day by day.
Yep.
There's a wonderful book called Men, Lust and Meth or something. Dr. David Fawcett. That was an incredible resource for me. And Brad Lamb at Breathe Life Healing Centers. He has, I think, one in New York and one in LA. He's an incredible resource as well. So
what was the name of Brad's?
Brad's facility is Breathe Life Healing Centers.
Breathe Life. And what was the name of David's book?
Men, Meth, and Lust. Something. Those three words, I can't remember the order. But an incredible, comprehensive, clinical understanding of the crystal meth epidemic in the gay community.
Cool. Thank you, Jason.
All right. Thank you so much.
You're the bomb.
Oh, I appreciate that.
Keep going. Appreciate it. Appreciate you. Sure. Appreciate what you've been doing. Thank you for listening. If you know of someone who is gay and also a meth addict, this would be a good podcast for them to listen to. I'm going to, in the notes for this episode, I will put the resources that Jason mentioned. The book by David Fawcett, Fawcett, is Lust, Men, and Meth, A Gay Man's Guide to Sex and Recovery. And and the other resource I don't have quite yet, but I will put it in the notes. Thank you for listening. We'll be back again next year, 2023. That's the year that you or your loved one gets clean and sober. We'll be back.
You have been listening to the Addiction Podcast, Point of No Return. For more information, reach out to us on Facebook or go to www.theaddictionpodcast.com. Our email is theaddictionpodcast@yahoo.com.